Welcome back. Now, the spate of abductions and attacks on schools and students in Nigeria has become quite alarming, to say the very least. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, about 950 pupils have been abducted from their schools by gunmen in the last 6 months, and that's from December 2020. And recently, over 100 students were kidnapped from Bethel Baptist High School in Kaduna, which has become a hotspot for these kinds of attacks. Now, days after the Kaduna school abduction, suspected Boko Haram fighters struck in Dabna, Adamawa State, killing 24 people, including a vigilante leader and village head. As we speak, many other students abducted from schools in Kaduna, Niger, and Kebbi states are still being held by their captors. Now, what more can the government, security agencies, and even we as citizens do to guarantee security across the country? Let's now discuss this further. I'm now being joined on the program by Dr. Kabir Adamu, a security risk management expert and CEO of Beacon Consulting Limited. He joins us via Skype from Abuja. Dr. Adamu, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, these attacks are happening on almost a daily basis. What exactly is the missing link? Because we can actually say that security agencies are not, or we can't rather say that security agencies are not doing their best.
Yes, clearly the security agencies appear to be overwhelmed, or rather the security architecture. Let's separate the agencies from the architecture itself. It appears to be overwhelmed and not capable of protecting our students. In that particular instance, so the incident that happened in Bethel School in Kaduna, there was another incident that was repelled on the same night. So yes, security agencies are trying their best. They repel some, but then others are successful. So in direct response to your answer, why do these things continue happening? And I can give a couple of reasons. Number one is that it is a low risk and high yield occurrence. In other words, the benefactors, those who carry out the abduction, end up getting a lot of money from the parents of the students that they abduct, or sometimes even from the government. Although in this instance, the Kaduna state government has said it's not going to pay ransom. When they collect the money, they're able to spend that money without any consequence. And so that is why more people are going into this type of abduction, targeting schools in particular. Let's remember that these kids are gathered in one place, so it's very easy for the gunmen to come and then take them away. And because they've tried it severally, it's a continuous process. The second factor is that they have where to hide them. And that leads me to the point around ungoverned spaces. Kaduna has a lot of ungoverned spaces. The forested parts where these bandits hide, where they come out, kidnap the students and take them there and keep them. Imagine a situation where these ungoverned spaces don't exist. It's unfeasible to think that any group can kidnap up to 100 students. Where are they going to keep them? If they keep them within the community, someone would know and someone would report them. But because of these ungoverned spaces, they can take them, hide them there. And then it takes me to the third point, which is the supply chain that has emerged and that is feeding into the kidnap for ransom industry, as it were. People are supplying food, people are supplying drugs to them, people are supplying foil, and then several other things. And these people don't want this to end. So they become informants. They are making information available to the criminals. And of course, that means the industry will continue to flourish, unfortunately. So these are some of the factors that have made kidnapping, targeting schools, a lucrative venture. And unfortunately, it is going to flourish. Now, we can also add another element, why Kaduna specifically, and that brings me to the political dynamics at play. Governor Kaduna, Governor El-Rufai, unfortunately, has come out to be controversial governor in different ramifications. And it appears there is a political objective to make him look weak and not performing. And I think it's also leading to some of these criminal activities that we're seeing in the state. In other words, it's easy for the criminals to get detractors who are not in the good books of Verify, and that would either support them directly or indirectly to allow these kind of activities to continue.
And I know you've mentioned quite a number of factors, but several security experts too have also spoken about actionable intelligence. And in these cases, we've seen communities and security agencies cases where they got intel before attacks. So for example, the Federal Government College in Kebbi, security men were in fact stationed at that school, but we saw what eventually happened. So in this case now, what exactly is the problem? Again, this is not just for schools now. Also the Boko Haram attack that we saw in Adamawa where 24 people were killed. What exactly is missing?
Time will not allow me to go into the technicalities of risk management, but in simple terms, I would say the mitigation measures that was put in place is not commensurate with the threat element. Now, what is the threat element? These bandits sometimes come on 50 bikes with 2 persons or sometimes 3 persons per bike. So it means we're dealing with 150 persons armed with AK-47 with 60 in the minimum 60 ammunitions, because what they do is they tie 2 magazines together. Now that is assuming they don't even have extra magazines, and I'm just using the basic of weapons, which is the AK-47. So imagine a situation where you put 20 police personnel in a school to mitigate or stop an attack from these 150 bandits that are coming to attack them, plus their informants that I mentioned earlier on, and several other factors that are working in their favor. So there is no commensurate measure in terms of the mitigation measure and the threat that is facing. And like I said earlier on, it's the failure of the security architecture. Part of time will not allow us to go into this in details, but security should be deployed and implemented in concentric cycles. Now we consistently make this mistake in Nigeria, where we deploy security specific to targets without the concentric cycles that should help, and there will be force multipliers for any security arrangement. If you have a concentric cycle of deployment, it means even if the first cycle is circumvented, it will be very difficult to circumvent the second cycle, and of course almost impossible to circumvent the third cycle. By the time you do the first one will report to the second one, there will be reinforcement, and then the enemy or the adversary would be subdued. But in our instance, we deploy specifically to the schools and then forget that there is a perimeter that we need to guard. It happened in Lagos when there was an abduction. The entire Lagos was cordoned. It became impossible for the abductors to run out of Lagos, despite the fact that there were different channels for them to do that. So I think this is something that our security architecture needs to look into. Let's limit this specific deployment. Let's go back to the age-old concentric cycles of deployment of security, and then add the specific deployment as an additional factor. So in the case of Yaouri that you mentioned, there should have been concentric cycles, and then the 20 that were deployed to that school should have been just an addition, so that even where the bad guys come to attack the school, even if they subdue the 20, these other forces that are deployed out can withstand their firepower. And in speaking about concentric cycle of deployment, I would always want to remind us that we over-concentrate on the military. There are 27 ministries, departments, and agencies in Nigeria that are involved in security. Now, if all of these 27 come together, then we'll have enough for these concentric cycles of deployment that I mentioned. And that means they need to work together in synergy, and their operational capability should be enough to ensure that they withstand this threat that I mentioned. Again, it's a function of the capability of the mitigation measures vis-a-vis the threat element or the risk factor that the threat element possesses.
Let's talk about the issue of ransom now. We know that government has spoken and continues to speak tough about ransom payment. And there's also been talks about criminalizing the payment of ransom and so on. But how easy will it be telling families of victims not to pay ransom when there seems to be no form of alternative? Or if I can even put it this way, as it is now, do you think, or is there an alternative to ransom payment?
So the alternative would only come before the abduction. If the abduction happens, you are left with only 2 options. One option is either to pay the ransom or to deploy, special forces to go and rescue the victims. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we do not have that capability. other countries have. We saw when the American was abducted in Niger and how special forces came, tactical forces were able to rescue him without any casualty. We don't seem to have that capability here in Nigeria. So frankly, you are left with only one option after the incident has happened. But there is a lot that we can do before the abduction takes place. So if I'm going to advise government, the advice would be on the prevention of the abduction before it happens. And once it happens, I don't think government has the moral responsibility to stop anyone from paying ransom, because the responsibility is actually on government to prevent the abduction from happening. If it fails in its responsibility, then it should allow the parent to be able to sue government for failing in its responsibility, just like government can now, if this law passes, can now sue the parent for paying the ransom. That way, then we know we have some level of fairness. In the absence of that, I would say we should allow parents to continue paying ransom. Of course, there is a consequence. The more we pay ransom, the more the industry continue to flourish. So we're in a catch-22 situation, a double-edged sword, that as a nation, we should speak up and join forces to stop this nonsense. Like I said at the beginning, the ungoverned spaces where these guys hide is what we need to immediately dominate and prevent them having the spaces for holding their victims and for hiding and continuing their activities. Currently, we're not doing that.
Well, Dr. Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Expert and CEO of Beacon Consulting Limited. We thank you very much for speaking to us on DEJI360. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Stay safe.
We'll take a break here, and when we return, we'll be looking at this same issue of insecurity from the angle of an educationist.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians are saying in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, and use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.